transforming to grow your business? Skills Future has various programs and schemes to help you level up. Tap on the skills framework and determine key skills areas to optimize your manpower development plans. Find information on sectors, career pathways, job roles, and research available training programs to obtain new skills. Organize a free Skills Future advice workshop for employees at your office to identify their training needs and the relevant training programs required. Get $10,000 Skills Future Enterprise credit to lower your out-of-pocket expenses by offsetting costs of training and other transformation initiatives. Tap on the National Centre of Excellence for Workplace Learning Program, or NACE, to learn how to retain and grow knowledge and skills at the workplace. The experts at NACE will identify issues and provide customized training solutions. The SG United Jobs and Skills Package builds talent pipelines for you. You can also tap on the Skills Future work-study programs to access local graduates. Join a Skills Future Queen Bee network and be part of a learning community to grow your business capabilities as you transform. For information on the full suite of initiatives, visit the Enterprise portal for jobs and skills or email enterprise_engage@ssg.gov.sg today.
After the Future Skills Framework was actually added into our e-learning platform, I think the first most immediate help to me was that now I can actually have a view of what kind of skills that I need.
After almost 10 years of not studying, it was definitely difficult. What we learn in school is not exactly the same as what we do at work.
Working in Crimson Logic for 10 over years, I felt the need to try something new, but that also means I need to start from scratch.
It is through this knowledge that helped our company get through the pandemic as we reinvented our business model through a digital platform.
Due to COVID, we were very inclined to follow what the country wants us to do. In terms of managing the business, we were constantly evaluating and thinking of ways to shorten our processes. And also with additional funding from SSG, we did even more to further equipping ourselves in all aspects to be more efficient and also provide better quality service.
When they first told me that there was an e-learning platform, I think it was quite surprising. At that point in time, there was only product information within the platform itself. But in terms of skills and all that, I would say it's quite limited on the e-learning platform.
As we found out about the framework through SSG and the NTUC Union, we actually make the whole e-learning platform more complete. We used to have some blind spots. We didn't know that some of the courses are important, some of the skill set we forget to impart. And because of the framework, we make sure everything is there.
We recognize that the downtime can be a little daunting for employers, especially when the entire process is rather time-consuming. But I see it as just how machines require periodic maintenance to operate at its maximum efficiency. If you look at skills development the same way, in the long run, I say it's truly worth it.
One of the initiatives that our company has invested in is that of the conversion programs.
During my mid-career switch, the company have given me an opportunity to take a computer forensic course. This course given me a wide knowledge of what is really a computer forensic means to me. This is where I take the course during my free times, and at the same time I was given job training for my own career or my own path. I need to advance. If we still stay at the same levels of learning or understanding, we will not gain more, to learn more, to get more skill knowledge.
So I attended the Developer Foundation training course. It allowed me to acquire useful skills in digital marketing. We transformed into a digital business, and all our products and services are much more accessible than before.
Eventually, we saw the impact it had on the company, how we were better able to hold meetings, better able to use systems. We can see a result on the bottom line as well.
The skills framework has helped us in terms of our business direction, and especially in terms of the skill set needed going forward.
We have people who left the company come back talking about how in terms of opportunities to learn, to grow, it's much better here compared to companies out there.
It is imperative for employees, young and old alike, to actively seek for ways on how to improve their knowledge and skill set. And I think as employers, it is our responsibility to encourage them.
I guess the 2.5 years of the work-study program is well worth it. From this work-study program, I can install security systems, fix errors, and also troubleshoot these security systems on site. And I feel like I can contribute more to Dragnet.
What we deem as important is to provide our people with the opportunity to flavor a different business group. We have actually gone through job rotation, for many years already as part of employee development. CEO coined the term Employer 4.0, an employer who truly believes in developing the strengths and the talents of the people.
I think it's very important for companies to groom their talents by giving them a lot of opportunities for self-development.
We are not just only willing to invest in terms of sending people for courses, but the other part really is investing in the time to walk alongside that colleague.
Companies must look at the big picture to see where they want to be in 10 years' time. For any business to propel forward, the team is very important.
Overall, it helped the company to be more structured and the people to be more knowledgeable and more equipped to bring the company to greater heights.
Thank you for making it. I know we've hit today, and I think most people were in disbelief yesterday about all the changes that we're now back into. So thank you for spending the time to join me today and look at how we can actually help avoid some of those key traps in business. And this is something that I've been involved in for a very long time, working with lots of clients globally. And it never ceases to amaze me just how many things are hidden. They're just outside of our sight because we get so busy with everything we're doing day in, day out. So we're going to go through those today and have a really good chat about it. And I think, everyone would probably agree in the room that our business landscape changed a fair bit over the last year and a half. So we have a fair few things to grapple with anyway, which makes us more prone to miss some of the key things that we need to deal with inside the business to really improve it and make sure that we're not missing things and losing money for no reason. So I'll go through my slides. It's just gone a little bit to sleep at the moment. There we go. So a little bit about me, for those of you that I haven't met. I've been in Singapore now working for many years, but living for just on 5 years now. So if I haven't met you, hi, thanks for coming on board and joining me today. I've got over 25 years now of global experience working with everything from startups right through to multi-billion massive pharmaceutical companies. So I must say throughout my career now, I don't think there's many businesses I haven't actually worked with, whether they've been electrical, manufacturing, labour hire. Here, in instance, for Singapore, I was the Vice President for Denata at the airport, so ground handling, and working very closely with CAG and CAS and really understanding the environment here. So there's a lot that I've had a chance to be exposed to, which is why I like to share some of the things I've seen, because they're things that you won't always see, particularly if you've been in one or two business streams for most of your career. You get very focused on that, which is obviously helpful in terms of strategy, but can put the blinkers on a little bit in terms of other opportunities that you might not be used to seeing. I also work with Cambridge Corporate University running their MBA and BBA programs. So that, for me, focuses largely on the HR side. So if anyone today has very specific HR related questions, I'm more than happy to take them later on as well. If you have had a chance to listen to IBGR, that's a global radio station, which I talk on once a week on a Thursday, Singapore lunchtime. And that's all about engaging your people, which would be a key theme of today's talk as well, because we're really focusing in on the people behind your business. I think most now as business owners and leaders, you've had a lot of exposure to strategy, business, finance. They're all key things to keep a business moving forward. However, the people quite often tend to get overlooked during that process. And ultimately, the people are the powerhouse behind everything. They're an intrinsic part of your business and your everyday life, as we all know. If you can't engage with them and find a mutually beneficial way to work with them, then everything else starts to suffer in your business. Now, I passionately believe in ensuring that your people are not only engaged, but in putting people at the center of your work equation. Because this way, no matter what type of business or product, service, which is still vitally important that you have, you actually can get your people working for you to make sure they're driving it forward, rather than just ticking the box and moving on to the next thing. And that's a very big difference between highly successful companies and ones that are just kind of getting there. It's how engaged their people are. So let's have a look at that today and look at how we can utilize that for you as business owners and leaders so that you can get some benefits back. Because after all, the people really are the core of your business. When you take away everything else, your strategy, your finances, what you're doing day to day, it's the people who drive everything. And like your own personal core, we tend to forget about it. You know, we tend to just go on with our day to day. But it's one of those things that we need to focus on if we really want to develop it and make sure it's there for the long term, which is what we're looking at today. Now, with this slide here, I would normally tell a few stories first and give a bit of an introduction around asking you to be uncomfortable to be successful. But I think with everything we have been through over the last year and a half, we've all had to be pretty uncomfortable, particularly if we're still here today. That's a big well done. If your business is still functioning and you've made it through, you've learned how to be a bit uncomfortable at work and really capitalize on those things that have been happening around you over the last year and a half. Our business landscape has really, really changed. And as we've all known, particularly with yesterday's announcement, COVID's kind of here to stay for a bit, and it's going to keep impacting on us. So let's have a look at how we can use that uncomfortable situation to our advantage and how we can build our businesses around it, regardless of whether we're going to get another set of restrictions or a last minute change or anything else that might be happening out there. Plus, we can improve our own businesses, looking at the failures of others. And I must say myself, with all of the clients I've worked with globally, it's the failures that they normally call me in on. They're accessing my help because something has gone wrong. Now, that something could be anything from finances to structure to people, but it's gone wrong and it's been a failure in their business, and they need someone with an outside set of eyes to help them find a way to fix it, change it, and develop again for the future. So we'll be talking about that a little bit today as well. So throughout our webinar today, we've got a few different areas that we've broken it up into. So for the first part, as we're talking now, we're going to look at some of the key issues in the workplace right now, help you identify them and look at the breakpoints. So we can really then look at the second half of the webinar to talk about how to fix them and a variety of different ideas that you can use in your business, no matter what type of business you have or what the size of it. The ideas will actually work for everyone. So let's go through those as well. We're also going to make this a slightly more interactive workshop. Now, I know not a lot of the webinars with the chamber have been usually interactive, so this might be a little bit different for some people. So if you get a little bit lost, do just ask in the chat function and we'll help you. There's just a couple of things that we're going to be doing, including some networking and talking, as well as using the chat function and some poll voting. So I'll give you a few moments to get used to those if you haven't had a chance to use them in the past. And then towards the end of today, we'll go back into really going through those key topics and allowing for questions. But throughout the day, I'm more than happy for you to send questions in on the chat. I have it open in front of me. For those of you who are used to speaking on Zoom and use it all the time, which is probably a much higher group than what it was a year and a half ago, I also have the chat function open on a separate application. So it's very easy for me to see questions coming through. And it's a little tip I would recommend to any of you if you're out there presenting. It's very, very useful to have it on a separate screen, particularly when you're doing virtual like this. It makes it much easier for you to be able to manage the flow during the day. So let's jump in and have a look at what we're going to be talking about in a little bit more depth. Now, this is where we're going to ask you to use the chat function. So hopefully you've got the chat up on your screen or another device in front of you. And what I really want you to think about, just to get our minds working, because we've all probably had a nice big lunch and we're heading into the afternoon, is what is the biggest problem or concern that you have right now in your business? So what I'd like you to do is open that chat and just put in a brief note. It could be anything from finances, it could be product direction, it could be strategy. Just whatever is really bothering you right now in your business, just pop it in the chat function so I can see it pop up. And that will help me understand where everyone's at and to help structure the second half of the talk so that I'm really focusing on examples that are more relevant to you as a group. Now I can see overseas partnerships coming through. Yep, absolutely. I think a lot of businesses in Singapore really want to expand across border. Of course, we're a smaller country or city-state, to be correct, and we need to get out if we want to really grow our businesses. Long-term strategy, absolutely. Translating strategy to actions at all levels. And that's a really interesting one because that links strongly into your people and how you integrate them into your strategy and your culture, which we'll be talking about towards the end of this talk. And the people with the right skill and attitude. And that's a really interesting one. And I've got this in one of my slides a bit later. Attitude is such a big thing for business, particularly now our workforce has changed. And one thing I always remind my clients is that we can't train for attitude. We can't train for motivation. We need to make sure we're hiring for that and then providing the right landscape for it to succeed even further. So it's always something to bear in mind. That's part of your hiring processes. Resisting to acknowledge that COVID is here to stay. That's a really good comment because I think a lot of us keep thinking we're almost there. We're almost there. We're done. And it just keeps surprising us every single time. So something we're all trying to look at and how to sustain that yo-yo sales with the pandemic. And a lot of that can be backed up by the people structure you put into your business because it will allow things to flow much more smoothly as you move through all the crises. And that will be the big thing that we'll talk about during today is that those businesses that have been successful over the last year and a half, now obviously some have just been lucky, they've been in the right space. So what's happened with COVID has been a good thing for them. But the other ones that have had to, that horrible term everyone's using is pivot, the reason they've been able to do it is because of the way their people have been integrated into the business. And that stopped that yo-yo effect. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Yep, I can see business continuity coming up. Always a really popular one as well. And converting to virtual mode with clients. That's been a massive challenge for so many of my clients over the last year and a half. And I must say one of the biggest challenges I see people talk about is how do they do a deal online? That's the thing where the relationship really comes in strongly. And it's very hard to be able to judge someone else's responses virtually when you're in this almost 2D world compared to literally sitting in a room with them or having a cup of coffee somewhere or a dinner and being able to talk properly and openly. So it's a different way to restructure our interactions there as well. And yes, uncertainty about when the region will open up. That's making it difficult for so many. I like the comment about scalability and flexibility in the workplace, because I think they're two things that when you get your people right, they start to happen naturally and it takes all the pressure off of you as a business owner. So some great comments there and they keep coming through. So that gives me some really good direction for later on throughout our talk today. Now, to get a little bit more interactive, I've tried to drill down just a touch. So now that we've thought about some of those key things that are bothering us in our businesses, I'd like you to try and nominate your top 3. So I think we should have IT putting the poll up on screen. Seekson, fantastic, thank you. They're very good at doing this. So jump onto the screen now. All you've got to do is nominate 3. So you can access those. I'll leave it open just for another 45 seconds so that we can all select a few that are bothering us the most. And we can start to see the results come up really quickly on screen. It's quite nice, these Zoom polls. It makes things much, much easier for us to really focus on where we're going. There's a big range there. I like one of the other comments that's just come up in the chat as well. How to trust that your people are working and not goofing off when everyone is working remotely. That has been one of the biggest challenges I've seen over the last year and a half. And I must say, I think it's a bigger challenge here throughout the ASEAN region than it is with my clients who are either in the Americas or over in Europe, because they have very different mindsets about working from home and they've been doing it for a little bit longer. So we can talk a little bit more about what we can do to make that engaging as well as believable, because we do find that there's that instant concern. Everyone's just sitting around. So great, we can see the polling is all up on the screen now. So I think we've got, yep, 73% voted. So thank you for those who found the poll on your screen and voted. And we can see some of the biggest issues right now. Revenue and finance, not a big surprise. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. But then the next two are really important. We can see people coming up there, closely followed by structure and strategy. And those things link really closely. I can also see the leadership coming in there and the competition. And it's interesting, leadership in itself, and we'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end of today's session, but leadership is becoming one of the biggest issues globally. There's a lot of information there. I've got the revenue and finance still leading the charge, which isn't surprising, but I'm really pleasantly surprised to see people as coming at number 2, because so many businesses have focused, and they have to be successful, just on their revenue and finance and forgotten to bring the people along. So that's what we'll do today to really help you capitalize on the people in your business and help develop your revenue and finance. So thank you everyone for doing that. I think it's really helpful to know where we're all focusing, because we have a lot going on right now. So let's have a look at how we can make revenue and finance work a lot better through engaging your people, as well as helping out with your leadership, because they're two key top areas. Now, this is what I put up on the screen for the next one, because as you saw, financial came up as number 1, declining market as well. These tend to be the common things that I hear when I ask these questions. The cost of things, the market in general, but then also trust. And trust is an interesting one. It's one of those things that you can have, but you can lose it really, really quickly. So we can see that most of the concerns are financial. There's no surprise here. But let's look at how the people can help you get there. Now, we've had COVID hit us, which has doubled all of those concerns. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see that a large portion of you nominated people as an issue as well, because that's the opportunity that many companies are missing right now. They're panicking, which is not unusual because they're worried about revenue. They're not taking the time to embrace the people to help the revenue improve, particularly in the COVID situation. They're having to do things that they have to do because of regulations or requirements, but not looking at the things that they can do because it will make their business better. So let's start to go into that a little bit more. How do we get our people where we need them to be? First of all, let's start with engagement. And engagement's an interesting one. There's a lot of statistics out there online. You can happily Google and find out lots of information. This is a big study done in America. Now, it's hard to get these numbers in Singapore. We don't tend to have these types of studies being done here at the moment, although that is improving and we're seeing more coming through. But a disengaged employee costs an organisation approximately $3,400 for every $10,000 in the annual salary. And the reason they benchmark it this way is because obviously the more you pay your people, if they're highly disengaged, the more damage they can do to your business, because they're across more of it. They have access to more. And therefore, that rubs off across the spectrum and can be really damaging. So in America, the economy gets hit by about $350 billion a year due to lost productivity because people are disengaged. Now, the big trick here is that your employees, typically, if they're going to have a problem in your business, they get disengaged highly in that first 3 months after joining your business. It's a key focus point for you as employers, making sure that when they join, they are engaged, because that's when they're at the top of their game. They want to be in their, they want to do well. You know, they're focusing on getting through their probation. But if something happens in your organization during that point of time and they don't feel accepted, they don't feel comfortable, they disengage really quickly. And the studies show again and again that if that happens to your people, they typically leave within about 18 months, which is a really costly exercise for you, particularly if you've gone through external recruitment on top of having to train the new person and integrate them into the business. Not to mention the lost business opportunity costs that are always part of losing an employee. So we really want to avoid that happening for you in your business and talk about the different ways we can get to that. So let's look a little bit more close to home and have a look at Singapore and the cost of disengagement. Now, there was a recent Gallup survey done, and Gallup, I'm sure most of you would have heard of. They're quite a big organisation and typically quite good in the way they do surveys. They're quite straightforward, and they evaluate really useful criteria. Now, this one estimates the lower productivity of actively disengaged workers. Now, they had to look at the whole Singapore economy. They couldn't drill it down into industry yet. As I said, these things are getting there for us. So Singapore's economics performance, it costed somewhere, and obviously they can't give us a precise figure yet, between 4.9 and 6.7 billion annually. Now, it's a massive figure. Disengagement is a real problem in workplaces. It's constantly being recognised. So the strategies we're going to talk about later in today's webinar will really look at how we can affect that and change it and bring it back in your workplaces. Everything we talk about can be done in any type of workplace to really help increase your employee engagement and therefore change these numbers. You don't want to be losing this money without realising it, but it's a really common problem in many, many businesses. So there'd be a massive economic benefit for Singapore if we can get this right, or at least get it better. Start to chip away at it and make it better in your companies. Now, this is one of those areas that's the old 80-20 rule. We get stuck in it, where you're spending 80% of your time on 20% of the people or the problem, and it's not healthy for your business. So engaged employees particularly, they encourage you to waste your time this way, because the problems that kick up as part of what you do in the workplace drags you into it. They get more disengaged and you have more and more problems coming through. So remember, as I mentioned earlier, you really can't train for motivation. You need to hire for it. And that's a key thing to think about as we're moving through today's talk, is have you got your hiring strategy right? Okay, employee turnover and cost figures, are they available in your business? Do you know? And this is a really common problem. A lot of the companies I see here, they don't have anything to do with employee turnover, how long a person stays in a job, how long they stay after training, how long it takes them to train, and how much it costs. These are all key figures you should have accessible in your business, particularly if you have multiple staff. You know, when you start getting over 20 or 30 staff, you lose track of this. You can't keep it as a focus in your own business. But these figures are key warning signs. They're key warning signs of disengagement. So if you have them in your business, make sure they're tracked year on year. If you don't have them right now, I really, really strongly advise you start working on these. They're not hard to find. You have a finance team. Every business has people in finance. You can tap on those people to start to develop these figures quite easily for you. But they're really important to help keep your business on track. Now, the cost of employee disengagement. This was a really big study, and it looked at nearly 200 organisations, and it found that the highest levels of employee engagement were 22% more profitable. So once again, we've looked at what it's hitting the Singapore economy on in terms of lack of engagement. But if you can make your company more engaging, it becomes more profitable. There's a straight link there. If your people are engaged, the profits go up. Plus, they're more productive, which isn't really a big surprise, because if they're more engaged, they're doing things, they're learning things, they're talking to others, they're sharing. And all of that links back into your productivity. But also, just by the very aspect of it happening in your business, it helps remove disengagement. It gets other people engaged in the process. So there's some good figures there for you to think about as we're moving through today's talk, and why I really want you to look at some of these key aspects of your business and how I can help you change them. This is a question that I find often hasn't been asked in a business. Okay, what do your people really want? Is it something you have asked? Have you had that conversation with your leadership team? But also, have you had it with your people? Is your business open enough that your people do speak up? Do you know, can you think of a time in the last year where people have come to you and said, hey, this really isn't working, but what we need is this? Or have they spoken up to their managers and said, look, I'm really uncomfortable with doing it this way because it makes people feel like that? Now, if you listen to the language I'm using, it's based on emotion. And this is a really important key, because we want people to be able to speak up and talk about this if we want to be able to understand what will engage them in your business. If you haven't asked the leadership team in the last year or so this question, and look, not a big surprise here because you've been panicking trying to deal with COVID, and you've been asking what next, how do we do it? But step back for a moment and think about it. How can you ask your people what they really want from the business? And how can you ask the leadership team? And a really interesting thing for you as a leader or an owner in a business is looking at those two sets of answers and finding out if there's any overlap. Now, in a fantastic business that's doing really well, that's highly sustainable and has highly engaged people, the answers are pretty much going to match. However, if your business isn't highly engaged, your people are drifting, you will find there's a big gap between these answers. And that gives you a lot of opportunity to close that gap. Now, obviously, when you ask people this question, some of them are going to come up with ideas that there's no way on earth you're going to be able to do as a business. That's not a problem. What you want to do is create the space where they talk. And once they start to talk, you can pick the things you can work with and actually make work for your business. So these are a couple of questions I would really recommend that you ask after today's talk, because they're going to give you a lot of insight into how well your business is doing and where some of your key gaps are. Now, let's have a look at how we can drill down a bit further into your people and where they're sitting right now. Now, I'm not sure if you would have kept up with everything that's been happening from the psychological HR space over the last couple of years, but the big shift from that space that we're seeing is that our people are now becoming value-based. And what that means for you is that they need to feel valued at work, but they also really want to be able to add value in the workplace. This is a big shift. 10 years ago, this wasn't a big issue. You know, people were very much, yes, the issue was still there that they would leave a bad manager. I think everyone knows that. But they were much more on the side of, you know, where's my career going? What are my reimbursements looking like? They were much more top of mind. Over the last few years, this has really shifted to a value-based workforce. Now, some researchers argue that's a big part of the Gen Y coming through because they have quite a different mindset from our Gen X and our previous workers. And that is very value-focused, very brand-focused quite often as well. So once again, this is something to bear in mind when you're looking at your people and how you can address it in your workplace. We're looking now much more at values. People aren't there generally, on the whole, for a career for life. We're finding now that people are changing careers 5, 6, 7 times. It's really, really volatile, which means their values are driving that change as well as their needs and wants. So that changes how we interact in the workplace and what we offer in terms of the workplace and how we engage our people. So you can see on here, there's 4 key points to look at in your business. What do they want? Well, right now, it's value, it's respect, it's exceptional leadership. This is really key. Leadership or poor leadership is losing a lot of companies, their people, but it's also causing the people to stay to disengage. And quite honestly, when I look at the costs and I drill down for some businesses, it's much better if those people had left rather than stay with you and they're totally disengaged and they're causing more problems in your workplace. And this comes back to getting your leadership team right, but also giving them the right tools and skills to be able to do their jobs as well. There's also connection coming through. People want to feel connected to each other in some way, shape or form. And that's really different across industries. But it is a valuable point we need to assess for our own businesses and work out what it means for the people in our workplace. The next key thing I see coming through that causes a lot of problems in any business is communication. Now, it might sound obvious. We all have, or most of us have mobile phones. Most of us have access to an email, although it might be on a mobile, it might not be a laptop. And we communicate on lots of social mediums now. I think, you know, everyone knows about LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's so many social opportunities. But it's poor communication that's damaging a lot of businesses and causing employee disengagement. And what I'm talking about with poor communication is that it's not regular, it's not available, or worse still, it's contradicting, which causes people to fear. And people have had enough fear in your workplace over the last 1.5 years with COVID. They don't need to create more fear for themselves because the communication isn't regular or clear. And I can tell you right now from years of experience, if we don't give clear, regular communication to our employees, they make up their own communication. And that made up version of communication is really healthy because they're scared. particularly over the last year and a half. So what they believe is really happening is going to be negative for your business and disengage others. So a strong focus on communication, making it transparent and keeping it truthful is really, really key to driving this forward. The other thing is adapting to change. And once again, I'd say well done in the last year and a half, because you probably had to go through a lot of this. But if you haven't, if your business has been one of those lucky ones that has just been able to keep going and is still very sustainable, ask yourself the question, are you agile or are you very fixed in your mindset? And typically a business that's been self-sustaining for some time, you do become fixed in your mindset. This is human nature. You know, you get used to doing something and it works, so you keep doing it. You forget to question. And that's where looking back towards adapting to change and developing an agile mindset in your business is really key to keeping your people engaged and helping them drive your business further for success, which is what we'll touch on later today as well. And then a big theme that will come up a lot is authentic leadership. Now, I talk a lot about exceptional leaders, developing leaders, authentic leadership. The reason I bring up authentic leadership so much is because it links to our value-based workforce. People are becoming constantly more value-based. If you have an authentic leader in your business, or leaders preferably, they naturally display empathy, but they're also really good at talking to people on an emotional level. Now, I'm not talking about getting emotional and talking about every bad thing in their life. What I'm talking about is they can communicate in a way that allows people to think more than just the numbers. They will feel emotionally connected to the communication. And quite often this is through storytelling and giving examples. But authentic leaders are fantastic at this. And that helps engage your people, because if they can relate to you based on values, and values are basically emotions for all of us, then they're going to relate to your business much more, and it's going to give back value to everyone. So I really want to keep a good focus on your leadership teams and authenticity. Now, all of the big studies, and they range a bit by a couple of %, but the majority show that having authentic leaders can actually make a difference to your profitability by about 9%. So it's a significant amount. This is just by having the right people in place. You're getting a 9% jump in your profits. So this is why this engagement piece is so really important for you, particularly right now when you've got so many other bad things coming at you that you need to deal with. Once you get the engagement right, it becomes very self-fulfilling and it makes a lot back for you. Now, this is a huge study that literally just got completed in the last couple of weeks. You can jump online and find this really easily. Watermark International, massive company, and their key job is to recruit people for companies. So their biggest need is to understand what you need, which is really, really important, because they go and spend all the time and money to find it out. So we can use their information to help our businesses. So I would really recommend you have a look at this. I've put some of the key figures in there and some of the key future of work issues that we'll be looking at and we'll be dealing with over the next couple of years. But the biggest changes that people found from this particular study was actually understanding and leveraging technology and digital change. Now, probably not a big surprise, 48% of the respondents. We're going through a digital age. We know we have to get this right. But then it started coming into the extension of the agile and the flexible workplace, 39%. That's really, really high and much higher than at any time in the past. This is a really important thing to recognise, because as we saw in some of the comments early, we get worried about people working from home because we don't know if they're really doing their jobs or if they're on Facebook. Okay, so we need to be able to deal with this in a way that engages our people still and gets a good result. So really important to start looking at how we build this into your strategy. Now, as I just mentioned, we've got a value-based group of workers out there now, and they're growing because our Gen Ys, our next lot of workers, they're coming into our workforce more and more regularly. So we're going to get more of this over the next 5 years. This is why we need to keep in front of it now. So 54% of the survey respondents, and these survey respondents were all senior leaders in very large businesses. So they had a really good insight to what's happening across their companies. They cited emotional intelligence as a key skill sought for their executives over the last year and the coming years. So once again, we're going back to that authentic leadership. They need to be able to deal with emotions in some way, shape or form in your business. 42% believe the top attribute they can offer an organisation is the experience, the breadth of it, the depth of it. And we hear a lot about T-shaped careers now, people coming in from different angles and having lots of different experience. It's really important because our businesses are changing so rapidly. Transferable skills are key to keeping you going and making you sustainable. The top 3 business areas that these executives believe require urgent attention: data analytics, IT and digital, which wouldn't surprise anyone. But the next one, it's been the first time it's been in a long time, is the customer experience and the service, 41%. That people factor coming back in really strongly. And 37% of this year's survey respondents believe that employers are renting talent to fill gaps. And if there's a subsequent cultural fit, then they look to hire. And this is a really interesting shift, and it caters for our workforce change. You would have all heard about the gig economy. You know, people aren't in jobs for life. They're quite often happy to take contract roles and do it for short term, then change again. Our employees, their mindsets have changed. They're value-based, they're looking for what works for them, and they will change rapidly if they're not happy. They can move. Even with a pandemic out there, the vast majority of your people can move roles. They're not stuck having to work in that role, and they're utilising that much more. So we need to understand how we can develop our businesses to make sure that we're covering that key aspect as well. Now, one of the key insights has been that the organisations that have done really well over the last year and a half are those that were able to make clear decisions at speed. They're the ones that have done the best. And this is a really hard ask. This is where I'm asking you to be a little bit uncomfortable again, because a lot of companies have a very big process in front of them before a decision can be made. We need to look at how we can make that more agile and really drive those decisions quickly. That's key, and it's really important. So we get a shift now as well from the permanent. I've mentioned this, the good old 9-to-5 long-term career is dropping away rapidly. We're looking at flexible, non-linear and multi-careers. So how does your business cope with that? It's a really good question to start asking now, because it will help you develop your people strategy. And then the World Economic Forum, they're estimating that 50% of the skills right now will not be relevant in only a few years. Okay, coupled with our employees' new ways of working, this is really important to bear in mind. We've got to start to deal with these concepts in our businesses. Now, we're talking about soft skills, and soft skills are key. This is the playing field that you're going to be working with now for quite a few years. So when we start to look at soft skills, 71% of respondents cited stakeholder engagement as the most important soft skill. That's up 12% from previous years and over 34% over the last 3 years. So really important, we need those authentic leaders who can engage everyone, the people, the customers, everyone around them. So it's key to start developing this in your business now. We've got a lot of complexity out there right now. We know this. So we need to make sure our key leaders can engage quickly, meaningfully, and understand the relationship. So this is a really important part of developing that people strategy that we'll touch on shortly. Emotional intelligence we've touched on, but 54% of the survey respondents are now seeing this as a key skill when they're looking. So we need to start working on this and working out how we can develop it in the business and make sure that people are involved in it. Quickly demonstrating capability. Now, this is one that's been around for a while. It's the third most important soft skill, and it's pretty consistent. We want our leaders to hit the ground running. There's no big surprise there. But then the next one was interesting. The authenticity is already starting to come up. 32% is coming up in these really big global studies. So our leadership and our authenticity, our stakeholder engagement are really key to success right now in the business place. So let's look at how we can start developing that solution for you. We really want to make sure that the people, the culture, the leadership aren't getting tied up just in the finance. Finance is incredibly important to keep your business sustainable and making money and revenue. But unless we can get the people, the culture, and the leadership right, you'll always be at a disadvantage. And potentially you will fall over, because if your people aren't on board, you're going to miss significant opportunities, particularly around innovation and continuous improvement, which we'll talk about shortly. So prioritize. People can be part of your strategy, and they should be. Why not? It can be involved in. The strategy and the people should be hand in hand. And there's ways we can do this. But most important, you need to authorize your leadership team to really endorse and focus on this. And this can be quite a new experience for some leadership teams, because they're used to just looking at the black and white metrics. So you need the right leadership team, or importantly, you need to start upskilling the ones you have so they're comfortable with this. They need to be comfortable with being able to tell a story, with empathy, with emotion. These are really important. If you think about yourself, think back through your work career. Those leaders that you're most closely aligned with, that you felt supported with, felt you could speak with, they're typically people who could explain things in ways that you understood, that connected to your emotions. They could tell a story, and that story could be from their childhood, but it still had a relevant point for the business. This is really important to think about your own stories and how you can develop them. So let's make all this monetized for you. Successfully engaging your people will give back to your bottom line. We've seen the numbers in the previous few slides. So let's really get this happening and make sure that your business is getting every opportunity it can to move forward. So let's have a look. This is a really interesting question for you to think about as we move through the next part of today. Frontline workers. This is a poll. So how many of the global workforce, and if you didn't know, it's a huge number, it's 3.5 billion are frontline workers. So that means deaf and non-techie workers. So you can jump on now, you can see the poll's open. We just leave it open for 45 seconds. Where do you think this sits? This is a hotly debated topic globally at the moment, because frontline workers, particularly during the pandemic, have been the most difficult area of our businesses to really access, particularly those who are non-techie, non-desk, because some of them, and we see it here in Singapore a lot, some of our frontline workers don't have access to mobile phones that can actually do things like, you know, WhatsApp properly and receive emails properly. So they're really out of touch. So yeah, no, good to see. I'll close this off now. We've got, over 50% have voted, so you've had a chance. But you can see there's a bit of a stretch. I still haven't seen anyone tell me the exact figure in the chat, so do feel free to put it in there. So when we're sharing the results, so well done. You've fallen into the right bucket. So the majority of our people, it's over 61% frontline workers. And these are people we quite often can't reach easily. These are people who are greatly impacted by change quite often as well. So we need to make sure, as we're looking at our businesses and looking to really grab opportunities that will work for us and make money, that we take this into account. It's really, really key that we get this right when we're looking at our people strategy and how we can incorporate it. So we're talking about our landscape right now. We know we've got lots of people out there, but we often forget that our front lines are the biggest, and they need open, honest, regular and accessible communication. But this can be really hard to get to them. So think about this question. This is a great question for your leadership teams and your strategy. How do we access this? And there's lots of opportunities out there as well. You've got opportunity to build. Now, AI is becoming massive in our workplaces. So is big data. And if you're clever, you can sell some of your big data as well as needing it for other things. There's the future of work. We know it's rapidly changing, but we need to incorporate our people. So how do we do this? Then there's the cost in that landscape. Now, we've got freedom right now to invent. We've kind of been pushed into that area where we've got no choice but to invent. We know we've had to go through work from home. We've had to do home-based learning. And we've had to understand remote work. But still, there's a lot of questions around how long remote will be. How can we make it work for our businesses? So we'll talk about that more shortly. And then we've got our people impacts. Now, it's actually estimated that poor communication costs around $62 million. So a lot of money that we lose if we can't get this part right. But there's also social connectivity and tech fatigue. So we need to make sure they're incorporated as well. Now, I haven't seen any other questions come up, but you're free to ask questions on the chat if you'd like to before we get to our first short networking break. But just before we get there, I'm going to have a little bit of a talk about brand equity, because it's really, really important. This is the starting place for your business. This is what people think of you. You know, they look at you and they go, gosh, you know, what's happening now? It's part trust, it's about customers, it's about recruitment, retention, but it's a starting point for everything else you build. Now, marketing companies focus on your customers. They look at it all the time, but they often forget your internal customers, and that's your people. So you have some immediate opportunities you can use here to start to shore up your business and start to really develop that focus on your people before you get to the key parts we're going to talk about shortly. Now, one of the most immediate ones in brand equity is find out what people actually think of you. Have you actually jumped on Google and put your company name in, or some of your leaders' names in? What's come up? Is there a Glassdoor survey? Is it good or is it bad? These are things that need to be addressed quickly. They're an immediate opportunity for you to start facilitating change in your particular business in a positive way. Then there's culture surveys, which we'll talk about a bit later. Involving your frontline, how can you actually do that? Asking for feedback, simple things like the good old Dropbox, particularly if you've got a largely non-tech frontline. Then having the feedback boxes where they can write something in actually works as long as you follow up. And that's the caveat. You have to actually read and get back and do something. But when you start doing that, you'll see it generates more and more, which actually helps your business. So there's lots of ways you can do this. You can also build your brand equity locally by really linking in with the polytechs, the ITEs, industry chambers or groups, and your name starts to get out there in a positive way. And these kind of things are free as well. They don't cost you any money, but they can lead to lots of opportunities. Then I've given you some medium-term opportunities to look at as well for your business. Everything from interns to mentoring to placements, but also CSR, corporate social responsibility. It will build your brand equity. Is it something you can do in your business? And how can you go about letting your people become engaged to drive it for you? And then we have the long-term focus, which is more about building your business for the future. And that's where we really focus on things like staff engagement surveys, 360-degree surveys. If you haven't in your business ever done a 360-degree survey, I would highly recommend it, particularly if you have a large distributed workforce and a large leadership team. There are online surveys that you can have access to, but they allow your people to actually look at your leaders, look at the people above them, look at their peers, and look at the people below, and give you an answer on where that leadership sits. It gives you so much information for your business that is really, really useful. So I would advise, if you haven't tried these, start looking at them. They can make a big difference to your company and help build your leadership strategy, as well as your people strategy. So if there aren't any questions yet on brand equity, what I'm going to do is go over to the business review. Now, I hope you've all had a chance to use Zoom groups before. And the reason I really wanted to include this today is because we've all been going through so much juggling over the last year and a half. We've missed out on being able to talk with our peers regularly and understand the things that have been actually successful for them. We've been jumping from thing to thing. We've been really, really trying just to keep our businesses afloat and do whatever we can. But as I mentioned earlier, some businesses have done really, really well, either because of the product they have or they've managed to change their flow and capitalize on what's happening around them. So what I'm going to do now is open up some Zoom rooms, if I can get my hair back up, which has gone a little bit to sleep, and allow you all to actually talk. Now, this is only going to be for 20 minutes. I'll pop between rooms as well if you've got any questions you'd like me to answer. But there'll only be 4 people in each room. And I can see people dropping off. Don't get scared. This is actually a bit of fun. You can come back afterwards if you don't want to be part of the groups. But there'll only be 4 people in each room. And the idea is very simple. Introduce yourself, your business, who you are, so you get to network. But also, if something has really worked for you over the last year and a half, it's been successful and it's made a difference to keep your business moving forward, Talk about it, please. Talk about it and share it with the people in the room. So I'm going to open these rooms now. You'll see yourself come up with a room number. All you have to do is accept and go in, and then I'll close them in about 20 minutes time. Then we'll be back to the main group and we'll continue with the key tips for your business and what you can do to start structuring it to really capitalize on people engagement. So enjoy the rooms and I'll see you shortly. Thank you so much for jumping in and sharing. The whole point of that episode was to give you a chance, one, to network a little bit, because I know how hard it is at the moment with all the restrictions, but two, also to hear about some success. Because quite often it's not until you ask the question that you can find out that someone else is doing something slightly differently that's made a really big impact for their business. And it might be something that's translatable to your business. And that's what we're looking at, sharing that success and winning from it. Now, let's bring the people into our business. The people are the key part that's going to make or break your business moving forward. And I really want to focus on some of the key things that you can do right away in your business to help. So, I just saw a question pop through. Apologies to stop for a moment. Thank you. Yep, the materials will be accessible. I believe Emmeline has a link that she sends you, and you can download all of the slides. You're more than welcome to take them and use them as you see fit. More than happy to answer any questions as well, whether it be later today or another time. My details will be on the slides, so happy to help wherever I can. So to move on, looking at continuous improvement. This is an interesting area in business. And I quite often find when I mention it, the first thought of most people in the business is, oh no, what are they going to make me do now? I'm going to have to do something else. But the thing is, continuous improvement doesn't have to be like that. It can actually be something that's really fun for your employees and actually drives your engagement. And that's the way I want to turn it around a bit, to really have a look at it. So the basic definitions, what is it? It's working out a way to improve all the elements of your business, such as the processes, the tools, and the products and services. Now, these improvements can be tiny or they can be absolutely huge and breakthrough. It happens either way in many businesses. It's also a strategy. So what I recommend with most of my clients is, do you have a part of your strategy now? And normally the answer is no, because it sounds like something really big and scary. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be something small that starts to drive itself. So why is it actually important for your business? What's good about continuous improvement? One of the main things is it uses all the brains in your business, your people. They're quite often hiding from you on the front lines, as we just saw. So how do we bring that back in so you can gain all that knowledge and actually benefit from it as a company? So if you look at those businesses who've done well over the last year, they've had their people involved really strongly. They've had a high level of trust and engagement. Now, there was a recent study done by Giant International. It was a 7-year-long study, so it was very, very good in terms of how robust it was. And it raised a really interesting point, and we've touched on some of this earlier in today's talk. But the average team, so your team in a workplace, only functions at about 58% of its potential. Now, most business owners are pretty horrified when they hear that, because they like to think people are doing a little bit more than 58% of what they're being paid. But the fact is, it's not intentional. What's happening here, it's the way teams are put together. And they tend to not capture the genius of every person in the team. But one person who's a little bit louder tends to be the one that speaks up. So think about it in your own business. If you can raise that 58, 59% upwards by 10 or 15%, the things you'll be capturing in your business. And this is where continuous improvement or a continuous improvement focus can really help your business make money. So adopting that culture of continuous improvement, it gives immediate positive impact. And the impact is all the key things any business wants. It's productivity, it's improved quality, it's lowered costs, decreased delivery times, improved employee satisfaction and morale, which actually then leads to everything else improving, but it also reduces your turnover rate. So really, continuous improvement is about capturing the maximum potential of all the people in your business. It therefore then engages them, keeps them happier, but from your point of view, it gives you back increased business results, which is what every company wants. Now, as I said, it's been given a bit of a bad rap as being a bit of a tick box exercise over the last few years. and people think they're going to have to do something else. But the thing is, it shouldn't be that way. You can use engagement tactics with all of your people to ensure that it's a living, breathing process that then draws on the experience and the knowledge of everyone in the business. The key is to tie that continuous improvement process into the business with programs that people enjoy. Okay, then it becomes a continuous drive. It also becomes a competitive advantage for your business. It's one of those projects that people actually think they can have some fun with. And I know that sounds a bit strange because it's very clear at work about what needs to be done. Excuse me. But if we give them a little bit of encouragement to actually do things they've been thinking about, let it be a little bit out of the box, it can make a massive difference to how your business actually functions. So let's have a look at how you can start on that. That's on the next slide. So as I said, most employees, when they hear continuous improvement, think, oh, they're going to make me do something new and it's going to be hard and I don't really want to do that. But the fact is it should be fun. And if you approach it that way in the business place, it will actually happen. So you start to ask your people, you start to make it rewarding. So what do? The first biggest challenge for most business owners is recognizing that your frontline probably actually knows more than you do. Now, I don't mean they know more about the company profits or the strategy or the direction, but they know about what's happening at the coalface. And quite often they don't speak up because they're worried they're going to get in trouble. So they don't share those ideas. Or they're people who have been there for 10 or 15 years and no one's ever listened before. So why would they listen now? That is a massive problem in all businesses, particularly those with the big frontline workforces, which we've seen is most of us. So how do you dig through that? It's a really interesting one to start digging in because you want people to raise their voices because they're seeing the problems at the front line. They might be glossing over them. They might be working around them. You might not even know they exist because you're not sitting at the front line every day. So you're not going to know things like the delivery driver has a bad habit of leaving it for 4 weeks post the service date of his tyres. So maybe he's putting the business at risk through an accident. You won't see this because it's not something you're going to look for every day. You'll be looking at delivery numbers. You'll be looking at revenue. You'll be looking at targets. It's that few levels down below that your people see. You know, they see that one person does something really well or that one customer has a constant problem, but no one addresses it because no one knows whose responsibility it is. These are the things you want to find out in your business because they can make all the difference to your success. And it does come from recognizing that you don't know everything. And that can be a challenge, but it's a worthwhile question to ask. So to start with, how do you make this a bit of fun for your people? You need a leader in your business who's willing to run this forward. They have to be engaged and part of it because they can really drive this. Continuous improvement should be a strategy that is easy to jump on board and fun for your people. So one of the things that I like doing with my clients is developing working teams. Once you realize that having continuous improvement as part of your culture in a good, fun way is something that's going to benefit you, you can start to develop working teams. So the easiest way to do this is to go back to your business and ask the question, what do you think we can do better? If this business is yours, what would you change? Start asking that question and get the feedback. Now you can do this virtually. You can do it with the good old-fashioned Dropbox mechanism. You can do it any way you like, but it has to be motivational and positive. It has to also be accessible for those frontline workers because they're the people who are going to come up with some ideas that you just would shake your head at and you go, wow, I never even knew that was a problem. But now that I know it's a problem, I can see how it's costing us money and I can see how it's leading to risk. If we change that, not only can we save money, but we can probably improve the whole process. So these are one of those key areas that we need to dig into, but unless we spend the time to set it up right first, we tend to miss. So ask the questions first, start getting the information, but your people won't speak up if they think they're not going to be heard. They also quite often won't speak up if they think there's nothing in it for them. And that's where I like working teams. Working teams are a great tool for you to break down boundaries in your business. They really succeed because they allow you to select people from across different business functions and have them work together on a key project. So this is where you need to do a little bit of advertising internally to get continuous improvement off the ground. And that internal advertising is about what you're actually asking for. You're asking for ideas. And you want to reward your people for good ideas and changes. You don't want to make their jobs harder. You don't want to make them more scary. You want to make them better. So you start to think of your comms that you're going to put out to your people at this point. And you're asking them to put their hand up with an idea. Now, not every idea is going to work, but every idea will be recognized. So if they feel comfortable enough in your business to say, I'm Lisa Jones and my idea is this, and they put it in a Dropbox, you read the idea, you thank them for sending it in. This is really important because you want to generate engagement and you want to generate trust. You thank them for sending it in and let them know that at the next management committee review, your idea is going to be discussed. Now, the idea might not be anything you can touch, but they still know that it's been actioned and thought about and discussed. And that's really important. When you start getting these ideas coming into you as a leader, you'll start to see things that you know you want to change. Now, this is different for every business, but you will find things you haven't heard of. I can guarantee you that. And that's where you develop your working team. Preferably, the person who's put the idea up, you involve them as well. Now, some people might be too scared to do this, and that's fine as well, but you give them the opportunity. Then you help put together a team around that can work on the idea. Now, typically, in order to get this running quickly for a business, because we know agile and fast is going to win the race right now, we need to be quick to market, we need to be quick to change. I would set a time frame of about 3 months as the boundary. So you set up your team, you give them the direction and the structure, but you also back off a little bit and give them a chance to run this forward. But they've got 3 months to do it in. So you need a really experienced leader here who can help them get set up, who can get them working together and give them that boundary they can work within. Because people function best within boundaries, but with the hands off a bit, so they can make their own decisions on how they get to that boundary. And this is really important when it comes to engagement. Yes, they've got the area they can work within without having to get extra authorization, but they know they can't go beyond that. And that keeps everyone comfortable, but it also helps engage your people. So I would really recommend start asking for those ideas and set up a working group to start running them forward. You'll find once you start doing this and you get to an outcome, your first outcome, the big trick then is to make sure you announce it. You let everyone know what the outcome was. You involve them in it, but you also reward the people who ran that working group forward and whose idea it was initially. And that can make all the difference because they now feel engaged with your business. They feel like they've been heard. They feel like they've added value. And these are all the key things our workers want. Plus, the rest of the business, when you talk about the comms around this and you say, this person brought this forward, we've worked it out, we're making these changes, they're going to save us money, they're going to make your job easier, whatever it happens to be, they get spoken about to the broader organisation. This means that your other people are listening and they're going, wow, you can actually speak up here. My ideas will eventually be heard and there might be a really good change because of them. So this starts to really increase your employee engagement, but it also drives your culture. Makes a massive difference in any business, but it's a huge opportunity that's nearly always overlooked. People get so busy in the day-to-day. They forget that you can really easily start continuous improvement. You can make it a regular event. You can have 2 or 3 of these programs running every year. They don't cost you any money. They get people together. They break down boundaries. They increase engagement. Plus, they give you an opportunity as a leader to recognize your people and reward them, even if that reward is only the recognition and the thank you that you give them. They still feel valued. So I really recommend you start to bring continuous improvement into your business because you will have at some point someone who hits on a massive change that saves you a lot of money or makes you a lot of money or keeps you out of risk. And they're the things that you're currently overlooking if you're not incorporating this into your business. So on the long-term side, you want to make it part of your strategy. You want your leadership team to really grab this and drive it. And to be quite honest, if I'm a leader in a business, and I've been in this situation many times, it makes my job much easier if my team is bringing forward great ideas and driving strategy and change forward. Because I'm not the one having to generate it. They've seen the problem, they're already automatically wanting to fix it, and they know how to go about doing that within that guideline that you give them. So your leadership becomes much easier because you're managing great ideas rather than fixing problems. And that changes your engagement and your dynamic in your business around. And that also helps you embed it as part of your culture, which means continuous improvement has to go into your documents. It's part of what you want in your business. So make it part of your company communications, recognize it, value it. Also put it in your leadership team's KPIs. They should be on top of continuous improvement opportunities, and they should be responsible for driving continuous improvement in general. That way it becomes a living part of your business and you get the biggest opportunity for success. Also, ultimately, it allows you as a business leader to identify who the real talent is in your business, because you see these working teams, you see how they produce results. So it makes your job much easier because you can see who the people are that are going to drive your business forward and engage the people around them. But it also helps keep your business ahead of the competition. You're using every bit of knowledge in your business if you're listening to your people and letting them drive ideas forward. And it can stop you from hitting costly problems that you weren't aware were even there. Because as a leader in the business, you're not seeing that ground level. So let them help you fix this. That's continuous improvement in a bit of a nutshell. I'm going to give you another slide which gives you a shorter overview to make it a little bit easier. So the key steps, and I've just given you 7, they're pretty easy. But it's first of all that commitment throughout the organisation. You have to generate that first and that noise around it so that it's thought about, accepted, and you get a chance to drive it forward. Now, I've put in there Kaizen 9. It's a popular one through this region. You don't have to use this. What you do need to think about is how you drill down to a root cause. And this is the chance when you develop those working teams to really help them go, okay, here's the problem. But really what makes that problem exist? Let's look at the next level below. Is that really what's doing it, or is there more underneath that? It's that simple questioning technique to find the root cause that will make all the difference in setting this up for your business. Then, as I said, tie it back to everyone's job. It needs to be living and breathing here. So put it in some of the leadership team's KPIs, but also reward it. Measure the results, make sure you know what you're getting, and then communicate those outcomes because people will get excited and engaged. And remember, this won't happen overnight. You're going to want at least a 3-month run-in period for an idea so you can test it and start to structure it. So be patient, but be deliberate and support it, and you're going to get great results. And then number 7 is very simple, repeat. Keep doing this. It shouldn't be a one-off. This will really help your business moving into the future. Now, I will take questions on this at the end, but if anything's coming to mind, you can put it in the chat as we're talking. I'm more than happy to answer things as we're talking through as well to make it easier for you. Now, this next topic is a fun one, culture and strategy. I think we would have all heard the comment that culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's been going backwards and forwards on this one. Oh, sorry, I just saw a question from the last presentation. Kaizen 9, you can Google that one for the exact answer, but SEMP is a technique to help you drill down to the root cause. So they have their own structure. You would have heard of things like Six Sigma or black belt training. There's a whole heap of these different trainings that people can do to help them drill down to the root cause. But the simplest way to explain it is that you just keep asking the questions until you hit that bottom where there's nothing else that can be impacting the problem. And that will get you to the root cause, and that's when you start to build up your solution. So I hope that answers the question that came through on the chat. But it's a good practice to get into for all of your leadership team and for them to then give that practice to their people because it helps get to answers much more quickly. So culture and strategy, this is a fun one. We need a great strategy to give you some revenue, make money, and have a business that's viable. But we also need a great culture if we really want to take that business into the space of being sustainable and long-term. Now, quite often we find that these two things fight with each other. And that really shouldn't be the case. Your strategy is your reason for being, essentially, and making money. At the other side, you've got your culture, which is the reason you are meeting your strategy or missing it. Your culture will take you one way or the other. And the reason for that is what sits in the middle. And that's your people. Your people will either choose to make it work or they'll choose to have it stagnate. And that choice comes back to yourself, your leadership team, and the way you're driving this forward. So I mentioned that famous comment before, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that came from the legendary management consultant, Peter Drucker. Now, to be clear, he didn't mean that strategy was unimportant. Rather, that a powerful and empowering culture, one where your people are engaged, is a surer route to organisational success because it underpins the working of your strategy. It's always your people that are going to get your outcomes for you. Your strategy is not going to pick up and walk along by itself, no matter how great it might be. So we need to get that people part and the culture right. So the needs behind developing a positive culture that empowers people through engagement is often forgotten in the rush to do business and make money. And that's not a surprise. So how do we bring that back in? So typically once a business is up and running, we tend to find that at that point in time, the culture starts to solidify. When it's quite young in its business cycle, it's still sort of a bit all over the place and it's really driven by the founders. But if you've been in your business for a while, you've probably got some type of culture around you. And it's important to understand what that is and whether it does need to be changed, and if so, how it needs to be changed. Because the better your culture, the more involved everyone is, the more honest they are as well, and the more opportunity you have for things like continuous improvement that we just spoke about. So let's have a look at what that means for you in terms of your culture. So your culture and strategy should be, and it can be, symbiotic. They should actually live together, okay? So allowing, or more importantly, encouraging this to occur in your business will take it up to those exceptional levels. So your strategy is what drives your business. What it should be doing for success. It's very metric driven and metric heavy. But it tends to forget the soft metrics and the people. Now, this can lead you into the trap of being overly relying on exactly what the strategy document says and forgetting the people. And that quickly leads to a toxic culture. And that's not what you want. Because often if people are just focused on the strategy document, they're running it forward for a few years, your leadership team becomes very homogenous. They very much just focus on what they started with, and then you start missing opportunities. Plus, your people see this and they start to disengage. One of the key tips here, if you're worried your strategy's taken over and forgotten your people and your culture, is your exit interviews. And many, many businesses forget to do this. They simply, and this data is available, it's there for you. They have people leave the business, but they never ask the question of the why, what can be done better, what could be changed to have you stay. All of those questions, they're often forgotten. But they're key questions, because if anyone is going to be honest with you, it's when they're leaving the company and they're going to another job. They're going to tell you the truth. Now, sometimes that truth isn't nice to hear, and that's fine. But the very fact we have the opportunity to listen to it can help shape the direction of the business. So don't forget this key tip. Make sure whenever your staff leave, for whatever reason you believe it to be, do a proper exit interview, because that can be a key warning sign for whether your culture and your strategy are disengaging with each other. Now, on the flip side, your culture is actually that glue that holds your strategy together. It's what's going to drive your staff engagement, and it's what's ultimately going to lead to innovation and growth. Because if you don't have a positive, thriving culture, people aren't going to put their hand up for innovation. They're not going to suggest things to you because they're either too scared, or they're sick of not being listened to, or they don't believe in the business, so why would they bother? Okay, these are all key warning signs. So we really want to make sure that we can start to drive that forward. It needs to be living and breathing. And once again, we need to incorporate it into the company documents. When you're developing a strategy there on the left-hand side, ask the next question. And the next question always is, what does this mean to my people? So you've got a strategy, you've got a goal. You know what it means financially. You know what it means to the business. But what does it actually mean to your people? And how do you involve them in that? And if you start asking that question when you're looking at your strategy lines, you will start to automatically see the things that can be done in your particular business that will help you. So as I said, the strategy and culture can be symbiotic. Culture is not a document like a strategy. It really is living and breathing, and it can change. It can change quickly and for the worse, or it can change more often slowly and for the better. It takes time to turn around one that isn't healthy. So the good thing to remember when we're looking at culture is that it has 5 key characteristics. It's something that's learned, and that's why it takes time to change it if it's bad, because people learn from those around them. It's also shared. So their belief system starts to underpin it. It's often based on symbols. Now, the symbols around your company that support the culture. It should be integrated into your strategy, and it should be dynamic. That means it should be willing to change and flex. So how you go about that in your business is very much about how your core business is structured. And it's always slightly different for every company. But when it's done well, it makes a massive difference to the bottom line. You can incorporate it together, and your people will start to be more engaged. So always ask that question. How is your strategy talking to your culture? What does it mean for your people? And if you're concerned, start going back through your exit interviews, because that will tell you a lot as well. Now, just to give you a few hard facts and figures so you've got them, it's really interesting. This came back from a Harvard review. So it was a really big review, and it was the relevance of strategy and culture. And they decided after this massive review across many, many companies that there were 5 key benefits that every business can capitalize from. So when the strategy is aligned and a strong culture drives it, you have much more positive outcomes. Now, there's probably no big surprise there. But selecting or developing your leaders for the future requires a forward-looking strategy with a culture that matches. If you don't have those 2 things aligning, you're going to select the wrong leaders, and that gets very expensive for you. Interestingly, in merger situations, designing the culture, and this is where we're starting from scratch, on the basis of the complementary strengths, so you look at the best parts of each culture and you encourage it to merge, will actually speed up integration. It creates more value over time. So it's really important to get these parts right. And interestingly, in dynamic and uncertain environments in which organizations must be more agile, learning gains importance. Learning is a key tool that you can use in your business to really help engage your people. And a strong culture can be a significant liability when it's misaligned with strategy. And that's what I was talking about. We want the 2 to be symbiotic. If they work together, you're going to get the best outcomes. You are also here now, the building a culture of belonging. This is really important because we talked about earlier, your people are value-based. They want to feel valued and give value. So have a look at how you can do that in your business. And there's some key tips there. It's seen for our unique contributions. People want to feel that they can be recognized. And that's where the continuous improvement we just spoke about breaks down this barrier a lot, because different groups of people can be regularly recognized for making efforts towards a positive company outcome. People want to feel connected to our co-workers. So how do you do that in your workplace, particularly when it's largely virtual? What things can you offer to help that particular point be instilled? People also know now that they have to change regularly. If they're going to be in the career for a long period of time, regardless of whether they're changing careers, they know they need to upskill. So they feel more connected to a culture that actually allows for career development and encourages it. Also, thankfully, they want to give value. So they want to feel proud of the organisation's values and purpose. All of this working together gives your business a competitive edge. So really want to look at how you can make this work in your business to succeed further. So in terms of culture, just before we go over to the business mismatches, it's a really big piece of work. I don't want to undersell this. It takes a long time to change a poor culture. But if you start putting in place the people engagement tactics, you will find it starts to change from the bottom up, not just the top down. And that's what you need. You need both the top with your leadership team being right and the bottom with your frontline workers starting to feel valued to really drive your culture to the right place. So do have a think about how you can do that in your business. And I'm happy to answer questions shortly. Now, business mismatches. This is one that I really enjoy a lot because it's an easy win. You can make money quickly here. There are two key areas where business mismatches can cost you money, but also where you can make a fair bit of money. The process one is super interesting. Processes. Now, I don't know if you remember, there was a story going around many, many years ago, back when management consulting, about 20 years ago, first started to become a real thing in business. And it was about a management consultant who worked for a big group of companies, and they had massive offices right in the middle of cities. And the offices were, 20, 30, 40, 50 stories high, full of people, desks everywhere, your typical big office block. And the management consultant was called in to help them save money because they were just running expenses up. It was really problematic. One of the first things this particular consultant did was look through the business, identify how they actually look at the business in terms of people in, people out. And he found that everyone was out of the building typically by 7:30 at night, back in from 7:30 in the morning. That was the rough figures. Yet that particular business, and there were many of these big office blocks, would leave everything running overnight. Now, it's not something we do now, but they would leave all the lights on, everything was up. It looked like a fully staffed office all through the night when no one was there, bar a few cleaners. And the first thing he did was have that change and have the lights turned off. Because the company was so big, it literally saved millions of dollars in the first year. It was a massive amount of money. And it was just because they were used to doing what they'd always done. This is where process in your business is a trap, and it can cost you a lot of money. If you look at your business closely, you will know there's many processes, whether it be what's happening in payroll, whether it be the manufacturing arm, whether it be your sales stream or your marketing or recruiting people. There's a process there, lots and lots of processes that you follow to get the job done. Now, the biggest thing I say to my clients is if you have a process that you've been completing the same way for the last 5 years, it's probably costing you money. Technologies move too quickly. People needs have moved too quickly. The workplace has changed too quickly. If you're still relying on old processes to get even a basic job done, you're most likely losing money for yourself without even realizing it. Just because it works doesn't mean it's working effectively for you and making you any money. So have a look through your processes, because if they've just been rolling along and no one's challenged them, you'll lose money. Do you have a yearly rolling audit schedule? And this is a big problem I see with many businesses. They don't even look at their processes at all, let alone check every year that certain things are ticked off and reviewed against relevancy. If you're not doing this, you're losing money right now. I can absolutely guarantee you there'll be an area in your business, particularly the larger it is, the more process-driven you are, it'll be costing you money. Now, one of the key ones, which I'll put on the end there, and it links straight to your people, is job descriptions. And this one I see so many people lose money on, particularly here in Singapore, because we have such a massive recruitment company cost. People outsource recruitment so much here, and the companies charge a lot for that privilege. So if you're functioning your business on job descriptions that are 5 or 10 years old, I can tell you right now, you're not getting the right people in for that job, unless you're very lucky. So one of the first things a lot of companies do is review their job descriptions. Does anyone actually check them for accuracy? Have they checked them for relevancy in today's company? Because quite often they haven't. And that can lead to a really dangerous outcome, because you're actually not employing quite the right person to drive that role forward. Or maybe the role itself isn't as relevant as it was, and it might be something slightly different. Might not be massively different, but it might be enough to really impact your business negatively. So business mismatches, start having a look. You can make a lot of money back here that will help your business. Then the other side, and the side that people really hate to face, is actually the people side of mismatches. That's where it gets a little bit more scary, because you're dealing with conflict and issues, and nobody likes conflict in the workplace. So this is something a lot of my customers, when I talk to them, we look at both the people coming in, the new hires, as well as those that have been there for quite some time. And you'll find that often that whole new hire process is not clear, it's not streamlined, it's not appropriate. So you're missing out on so much. And when you do this, you quite often bring the wrong person in. You get them through the recruitment process, you get them through their onboarding, they start their job, but it's not until a bit later you realize they're not really what you needed in the business. So this is an area you need to streamline and make sure is super clear. And there's some questions there that you ask yourself around that to make it work. And I'll go to the next slide to help you because it gives you the key bullet points. But the same issue arises at the other end. And I think we've all seen businesses where there's been long-serving senior leaders who don't match the business direction anymore, but they've been there for so long, they retain their roles. And that's a huge risk because if they can't remain current and upskill, they're holding your business back. And that's a much harder one to deal with quite often. But let's look at the beginning here. For those of you who are looking at bringing people on, this should be part of your people management toolkit. You need to have a robust recruitment, onboarding, and continual development program. Why is this important? Because it stops you from making mistakes, or at least 95% of the time. After all, we're all human. We will make a mistake at some point, but if you can get your recruitment right, followed by sensational onboarding, and then have your people out in the workforce performing for you and knowing that they've got a continual development program they can access to keep improving their own skills and stay with the business, it helps avoid making mismatches. You get the right people into the right job with the right outcomes. This is something I help a lot of companies with. So I've given you the key points that I make sure we have there. And I'll just touch quickly on the recruitment one. In regards to how it's run, you need the same hiring manager all the way through. Please don't disadvantage yourself by changing managers along the way because people have different perceptions and it leads you down a track where you can easily miss things. Same as I've got on there a clear rating scale. This is super simple. When I say a clear rating scale, what I'm talking about is develop your own. It only has to be 1 to 5, but it allows you to compare candidates. And it's across your soft skills that you really need this. You know, were they attentive? Did they appear motivated? Could you find something in your interview questions that showed they were? It's those things that you forget after an interview. And when you've had 5 or 10 people for the same role, you can get easily confused. Make sure you have your own specific rating scale. So after the interviews, you quickly write down on your 1 to 5 where that person fell, because that will really help you at the end of the week when you're trying to compare candidates and you've seen several. It can make a massive difference to the decision you make as well. Now, I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go through every point here, but onboarding, make sure that you've really focused on getting this right. People need to feel engaged. They need to feel valued in that first 3 months, and they're the key ways to do it. Make sure it's fully planned, it's tied to probation, and everyone knows where they're at. Keep it very simple. And then offer that career development and training. And that can look different for every business. This doesn't have to be expensive. I know a lot of smaller companies hide from this because they're worried about the cost. You don't have to outsource this. A lot of it can be done in-house. It can be done through things like mentoring, through effectively using those cross-functional working teams that I spoke about earlier. They're all parts of career development, but they're also all parts that help your business engage your people and develop your culture. Okay, your leaders as well, they should drive this. So if you're going to invest some money in external training, start with your leadership team. Make sure they're upskilled, because if they're really at the top of their game, they're going to help everyone else underneath. So there's some of the key points and the key people management toolkit that I make sure all the businesses I work with have down pat and can use it easily, because it saves them a lot of money. I'm happy to answer more questions at the end about business mismatches, but this is a key one that literally can save you thousands. Leadership. Now, we touched on brand equity earlier, and your leadership team is a massive part of your branding. You know, who they are they visible? Do they have open communication? Now, I put this slide up. I don't think you'd know any of these people because they're made up. But the idea is the communication. As soon as you see a slide like this, you look at the person, you look at their name, then you drill down and you look at their role. It communicates quickly. And so many companies miss this opportunity. You've got a leadership team. If they're hidden away at the back of the company website and totally unrecognizable or contactable, you've just lost an area where you can advertise to your people and engage them. So if you haven't already, look at your leadership team. Make sure you have the current photos. They're nice photos as well. They actually feel like the person is engaging. You can see every one of these photos. They're not just your standard headshot. They're actually doing something. So that allows you to develop that empathy, which is really, really important in our value-based workforce. Then you've got the name, you've got the title. Typically on a great website or a great company page, you have a click through from here to tell you more. But the first part that you can really capitalize on is show your people who you have. Make them feel engaged and relatable. And that can make a big difference for just the quality of your leadership and what your people believe. It helps them engage. Now, there's so much that can be spoken on about leadership. We're not going to be here for the next 5 days, so I'm going to just give you some of the key points that will help your business. So leadership, like culture, is part of that glue that holds your company together. We've already talked about authenticity, and authenticity is an interesting one because a lot of people just assume they're authentic. They like to talk, they think they're coming across authentic. The fact is you can't judge yourself whether you're authentic or not. It's the people who are listening to you who make that decision. So we need to make sure that you stay real and not fake if you want to be an authentic leader. So this comes down to understanding that storytelling part that I spoke about earlier. The really authentic, well-believed, well-trusted leaders out there are people who can tell a good story. And typically it tends to be more personal than work. But they can walk through that story. That story has emotional terms in it, and it allows people to relate to them. And this is what I encourage all the leaders I work with. Think about your own stories. You will have lots and lots of them. You've done lots throughout your career as well as your life. Think about the story, what you did and what the outcome was. Is it relatable to your business? Will it help people understand a direction that you're trying to go in or an idea that you're trying to get across? If so, use that story in the workplace. Develop it, share it with others. Your authenticity will quickly go up because people can relate to you. The great authentic leaders, they're like chameleons. They can bring out the best in others by being able to identify areas of themselves that are relatable. So they literally can be someone different to different people. And that's not because they're dishonest. It just means that they've shown different aspects of their personality and their character in a story that relates to that particular group or that person. And they can easily switch between those work and those personal examples to really engage people. They are also highly empathetic. So don't be afraid of using emotional language when you're telling a story, because it helps people understand you and it helps them believe in you as well. The next key tip I work on with a lot of leaders is around coaching and mentoring. And it's a really interesting one. The big 70% is because if you have great coaches and mentors in your business, it increases employee performance by up to 70%. That's shown time and time again in all the studies. That means getting rid of the old command and control managers and looking more at situational leaders who can engage your people and support them. They can bring out the best, and they do that by asking questions. And that's where being a really great coach or mentor helps you, because it develops your coaching muscles. If you've learned how to be a good coach, and there's lots of ways to go about doing this, you learn how to ask questions. You learn how to give people the chance to think about the problem they've brought to you and drill into it and start to develop their own solutions before you start offering them. And that makes a massive difference in the workplace. So if you're going to look at a program for training your leaders and upskilling them to help your business, I would recommend coaching or mentoring, because when they learn those core skills and practice them, it makes the difference to all of the employees around them. Up to 70% increase in employee performance should speak for itself. The next one is servant leadership. And this is a really interesting one because it's a way that you can develop on how to guide from a people-first solution. There's a lot of information online about this, but it's really about looking at what the people need first, as well as the business, and working out how to integrate them. So it's not putting your ego first or your own leadership needs first, it's putting the people in the business first. Now, it's a difficult concept for some to grasp because it can feel a bit like losing face because you're asking your people for their needs. But I really encourage you not to think about it that way, because it will engage your people and they will start to trust and believe in you, because they know you're putting their interests up as high as all the other interests in the business. You're not selling them out. You're actually working with them to get to the outcome. And that makes all the difference, which is why the background of servant leadership is really interesting. Once again, you can read all about it online. It's a very easy one to find, but look at the fundamental core of it, and it's something you can work with. And it shows you how you can still focus on the organizational goals, but you can still be a servant leader at the same time. You can still be authentic, and you can still use your coaching and mentoring. All of these three working together make fantastic leaders, and they can make all the difference. So to give you a little bit of context on this one, the servant leader really sits at the top two boxes on the screen. They're very democratic. They're very good at questioning, situational questions. They're great at it. But they've still got high task emphasis, and they've still got high people emphasis. The two work together. And it leads to a lot of transformational outcomes. It makes a really big difference. And we know right now the world is changing too quickly. We can't live on an autocratic background. We can't live on command and control, because we need to be able to embrace change and be agile. And that's where servant leadership can make a really big difference to your business. It's another great topic to focus on. And to make it a little bit easier to understand, it basically flips around the tradition. So you're putting the employees up the top, then the managers, executives, CEO, then board of directors, in the way you think about presenting something. It's not saying that you're changing the business model or the structure, it's just saying the way you ask the questions. And that will open up much more information for you. So if you really want exceptional leadership in your business, and this is what you need to drive business success, this will hold everything together along with your culture. Look at your leaders. Make sure they're involved in continuous education. This is where you do need to spend money on some training. This is really vitally important. You can look at things like developing a growth mindset, and there's a lot online that won't cost you anything to start delving into that. But there's also communication. Make sure your company communication is regular with no surprises. Make sure in your leaders' KPIs, their communication with their staff is the same. That will start to develop your culture. Authenticity we've touched on, but look at coaching and mentoring. Support people, but give them boundaries where they can work in their own way. If they cross the boundary, that's a different discussion. But people work much better if they know their boundary and then can work to get to the task completion they need to do. And trust. Trust is a funny one. It takes a long time to build up, but it can be lost in an instant. So this is where getting your communication right and making sure your leaders are authentic will help keep trust in your business. It is so critical for moving forward, particularly right now when we're in the middle of a pandemic where people are already scared. You don't want them losing trust in your managers. You want them to feel like they can trust them. And I just want to, as we're coming towards the close of today, just touch on coaching, because this can make all the difference. And it's an interesting statement. A coach is someone who can give correction without resentment. Think of how important that is. Your people will have to be corrected at some point. They're going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong. That's life. We all confront this. But if you can do it in a way that doesn't create resentment, you get a much better outcome. And that's where those core coaching skills can really help your business. I just want to leave you with some final points about what makes a great coach. And it's really about those discussions. They can bring up well-defined issues to someone's attention without making them feel bad, but actually encourage them to change. These are really important points. And I'll really stress, if you've never been through a coaching program and you're a senior leader, this is a great way to develop your own internal skill set. It also helps you save a lot of time, because when you learn how to ask these questions properly and you really get that breadth of experience, you'll find that any conversation you have with your staff has a much better outcome. And that's what you want. You want to be able to save money. You want to be able to avoid the traps of assumption, because assumption costs a lot of leaders and a lot of businesses a lot. So let's develop the coaching muscles so that you can actually start to capitalize on this. Well, I had a question come through so that I've just seen from Edie. Is there a list of Singapore SMEs that exhibit such a culture? That's a really good question. I haven't developed that list, I must say, but it's a great question to ask. And I think slowly more and more are getting there, particularly the newer ones, the ones that are recent tech start-offs and things like that. They definitely are focusing more on that coaching culture because it's very much part of the scene right now. But when it comes to more established SMEs, they're kind of looking backwards trying to catch up. And they're quite often bringing these things in. It's a slow change, but the change is happening definitely across those businesses. But yes, I'd love to have a list I could give to you. I should probably work on that because it would be a good example of what can be changed. So thank you for asking that question. So focusing on the leadership and the direction is really key. We know that COVID has changed our workplaces and it's going to keep changing them and keep throwing things at us the least we expect it. But the whole point of this webinar is that all of the key points I spoke about, the leadership, the continuous improvement, the business mismatches, they're all things you can do no matter what type of business you have. The working teams will get you out of trouble time and time again and really help your core business improve. So use them. They're there for you. They're easy to establish and they don't cost you any money, but they can save you a lot and make you money and stop you from falling into the hidden traps of having your blinkers on as a leader or a business and not seeing the areas where you can improve on. Now, some of the key points I've left you with on this last slide are just about the things that we're seeing come up with the future of work. Some of the things you need to incorporate into your people management toolkit and really think about how you're going to address them over the future. So as I said, these slides will be available afterwards and Emmeline can help with that. So look, a big thank you for staying with me. I know that the breakout rooms were a bit of a shock to some people. So I hope those who got into them and really talked got some great networking and some new ideas as well. But thank you for listening. I'm more than happy to take questions now. I've got my contact details on the final slide, so I can definitely take questions at a later date if you think of something. Or if you need to have a discussion, I'm more than happy to talk about what kind of things could be implemented in your business that might help. That's obviously obligation free of charge. So more than happy to take that call and talk about what can help you. And there's also the link there for the radio show if you feel like listening Thursdays at lunchtime to relevant people management topics that might be able to help you in your business. So do we have any questions? If so, feel free to pop them on the chat. Or if you would like to unmute, raise your hand and ask a question, I'm more than happy to take it now before we close off. You said motivation cannot be trained. Why so? It's a really big question. This comes back from the psychological side of HR, is that people generally are internally motivated. If they like a particular color, they like it for internal personal reasons that we can't assume to understand. If they love to be a cyclist, but they hate running, that's about something internal that we're not part of, that's part of their internal makeup. And motivation's a lot like that. Yes, you can force motivation, absolutely. You can set KPIs, you can set targets, you can give PIPs, performance improvement programs if people aren't doing the job they're supposed to be. That just gets them to complete a task, a very black and white metric. Are they motivated to do it because they want to? Because they love it, because they're involved in it? And the answer is no. They're doing it because they have to get by and to make sure their next paycheck is there. If you've got people who are internally motivated, who love the job they've put their hand up for, or who love the company or the industry or the direction, they're very much self-motivating at that point. Those people are highly positive. They drag people along with them. They make the employees around them feel good because they're so positive about what they're doing next. Now, we can give people tools to help them do their jobs, but we can't make them enjoy those tools. And that's what motivation's all about. And that's what I say, we can't train for it. We can force it, we can put goals in place that they have to achieve, but are they really motivated in a personal, happy, excitable, engaging way? And the answer is no. They're motivated by fear. And fear will only get us so far because our people can leave us pretty easily these days. There's lots of other companies out there. Even in this pandemic, we've seen so much change. People leaving different companies to go elsewhere because they don't feel comfortable or safe. So that's why I say hire for motivation and look for it in those interviews. Because if you've got motivated staff, they're driven, they're passionate, and they're engaged. And that takes a lot of pressure off of you as an employer. Okay, that's an interesting one. How do I suggest an SME with a small headcount, which that's quite common. Lots of you have small headcount, and a simple setup, manage a negative staff despite continuous engagement and encouragement from the boss. This is a really common problem. If you've got someone who, despite encouragement, support, and this is where I'd have to ask you to question yourself, have you given them the support? Have you given them the tools and the training to make sure they can do their job? And if you truly believe you've done all those things and you're encouraging them and supporting them and they're still negative, there's not going to be a lot of chance you can change that. And unfortunately, that's when you move through that warning process, you know, the performance improvement plan. And it's not fun, okay? But if you can really hand on heart say to yourself, I've definitely given them the tools, I've offered them the training, I've given them support, I've tried to help them, I've asked them what the issue is, I've given them the opportunity to speak up, and they still can't change that behaviour, and that behaviour is negatively impacting your people or your business, then unfortunately you have to make that tough decision. And it's not an uncommon one. You know, we do make bad hires. We're people. You know, and that's why I say getting your hiring process really right is so crucial, because it helps avoid this type of situation where you've got someone who is just naturally negative and they're not going to change. It does happen, and it's unfortunately the time where you as a leader or a manager have to stand up and have that discussion that if it's not changing, then this is the steps we have to put in place. And if it still doesn't change, then it will end in them leaving the business. So yeah, always happy to talk further, because I know these things aren't clear cut, and there's normally some very personal issues underneath it that you can't discuss in a forum like this. But yeah, more than happy to take a call if you want to speak further.